Hello everyone! I'm Angela with Happy Little Stitch Shop, and I am back with you today for the final week of our Guiding Stars Quilt Along. This is the quilt that we are making in our Guiding Stars Quilt Along. This quilt pattern is by Lavender Lime, and the fabric collection that we are using is called Songbook, and that is designed by Fancy That Design House for Moda Fabrics. So we have been working with this over the last 3 weeks, putting together piece by piece this quilt, and now we are on our final week where we are going to put together the quilt center, and then we are going to add the border to our quilt top, and we are going to be done. It's going to be like, this has been a super fast quilt along. I kind of can't believe it. So I hope you guys have had fun. And we're just going to walk through step by step, putting this quilt center together and then adding those borders. And then we're going to wrap this one up. So first thing we need to do, I've pulled 3 of our panels. If you remember in week 1, we put together section A. And in week 2, we put together section B panels. And now we have to sew a mixture of those together. So for our top row, for our quilt center, we want a section A panel sewn to a section B panel, sewn to a section A panel. That is a mouthful. You are welcome. I hope that that is clear as mud. So let's take a peek and I will show you what I've done. Here is my section A. I've got that laid out to go here. And I'm going to sew that to this section B panel, which is in the middle. And then we've got another section A panel over here. The only thing that I'm paying attention to as I lay this out, you can lay it out however you want to, but the only thing I'm paying attention to is I'm looking at the large panels. I probably don't want any of those next to each other. And then the first middle panel here that I pulled out had the same small panel as this one. So I switched that out because I didn't want 2 small panels next to each other. So I'm not going to get too carried away with that because that could drive a person crazy. But as much as I can, I will try to not have the same panels next to each other, but you can do absolutely anything that you want and whatever you want to make your quilt. Remember, as Lori Holt says, you are the boss of your quilt. So you put it together however you want to do it. So I'm going to take these 3 panels and I'm going to sew them all together. And then I'm going to add my other rows similarly, according to the pattern, and I'm going to get my whole quilt center put together. And then I will meet you back here. Okay, everyone, how did your quilt center come together for you? Mine is hanging back here. I have all of my rows together. I've got it pressed. It's ready to add the borders to. So I wanted to hang it in a spot so it won't get all wrinkly again. So now we are ready. We have our 3 rows pieced together. So our quilt center is complete. All of our panels have been used. Our section A's and section B's have all been used to make this center. And now we're ready to add our border. Now, couple things. When you look at your pattern, it will list the fabric number that you are supposed to use for the border, but it's not listed in the pictures in the front of the pattern. So let's take a look so that you know what pattern you're supposed to be using, or what fabric, sorry, you're supposed to be using. It's this one. It's the last big piece of fabric that you have left in your boxed kit. So this is what it looks like, and this is what we're going to be using for our border. And the second thing is that when this fabric was folded, it looks like it was cut and rolled and folded before it was ever rolled on a bolt. So when you pull it out of your boxed kit, you may, if yours is like mine, it's not folded in a way that the selvage ends were together. So then it's hard to cut with the fabric when you don't have it folded in half by the width of fabric. So mine was folded. Let me see if I can show this to you so that I had to refold it so that it was folded like it would come on a bolt with the selvages together. So mine was folded like this. So I had a selvage end up here, and the other selvage end was over here. So if I cut this, this is not width of fabric, this is length of fabric. And so I opened it up and took the selvage end with the print on it and matched it up to the raw selvage without the print. And this is what it's like when it comes on a bolt. So then you have a true width of fabric. So just match your selvages up so that it's ready to cut. So that's what I did. You probably want to press this if it's super wrinkly, but this is the way that it should be so that we are cutting a true 44-inch width of fabric. So now we need to cut our borders. So I'm going to cut a couple width of fabric at 5.5 inches. And then I'm going to take those to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew them together. And let me make sure I've got this right. I'm busy chatting and not paying attention to what I'm doing. So I'm going to cut a couple of these. It looks like I'm going to have to trim here because it's not quite. And then I'm going to sew them together. I'm going to cut off the selvage and then I'm going to sew them together. And then before I add them to my quilt, top and bottom, I am going to measure my quilt to make sure that I have the correct length. And actually what I typically do is I just sew a bunch of these together and then I just use it until it covers my whole quilt, and then I just take a scissors and cut the end off. So I'm going to figure out which way I'm going to do it, but I would recommend that don't cut your border to a specific 60.5 inches because your center of your quilt could be a different size than that. So just to be on the safe side, I would always measure the center of your quilt widthwise and lengthwise so that you know what your width and length of border should be. So that's a good habit in whatever quilt you're doing, because sometimes 1/4 inch seams are a little bit off, and so your dimensions could come out a little bit differently than what the quilt pattern says. So I'm going to cut a couple of these strips. I'm going to sew them together, and I'm going to measure my quilt center just to be safe, and then I'm going to start adding my borders. I'll be back with you in a little bit. Okay, how is your border coming together? So I will be honest with you, my video guy, AKA my husband, had to run some kids places. So I got a little bit carried away and I added the top and the bottom and the side border. So I'm going to go through though how to add this next one with you, the other side. So I saved that one until he got back, but it was going so smoothly that I just kept going. And before I knew it, I was like, oh no, I've done 3 sides. So I'll do the last one with you in real time. But for the top and the bottom, you know, just cut your strips, piece them together, add it to the top and to the bottom. I'll show you how I did mine on the last one, and you can see if that works for you or not. This is what I think is easiest. So I'll share that with you, and then it's up to you if you want to use it or not. And then we'll be done with this quilt. So I can hardly believe it. So let's take a peek. I've already cut one strip and I'm going to cut my other one. Now for the top and the bottom, if you recall, I told you that when you got your fabric out of the box, you fold it selvage to get the width of fabric. Now for the side pieces, the pattern tells you to cut length of fabric. So instead of doing selvage to selvage, I'm now folding so that I have a selvage on the top of my fabric, which I've already cut off up here, and a selvage on the bottom of my fabric so that we have length of fabric instead of width of fabric. It just allows you to have less seams in your border. So the longer piece that you cut, for the side one, then it's going to give you less seams for your border. So that's why they're doing length of fabric for this one. So I've already cut one strip for the length of fabric, and now I'm going to cut my second one for the length of fabric according to the pattern. You can hear my kids out there getting ready for supper. Okay, so now I have these 2 pieces. And before when I pieced my other side, I pieced these together and then I held it up to make sure that it was long enough to go on the side. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take these over to my ironing and I'm going to press both of these because they're a little bit wrinkled. And then I'll meet you at my sewing machine and we'll sew this together quick. And then I'll show you how I add it to the side. Okay, so I just got done ironing these. These are still hot or warm to the touch. So now I'm going to take one strip and put it right sides together with the other strip. I'll line it up. Make sure it lines up okay. And I'm going to get it under my sewing machine here. I'm just going to do a quick 1/4 inch seam. Along here. Okay, then I'm going to take this to the ironing station and I'm going to press this seam open, just like that. And then I will meet you back here with my quilt and I will show you how I add the border to the side. Okay, so I have my quilt top here. It's getting quite large and quite heavy, which I love. That means we're getting close to the end. And I have my final border here that I'm gonna add. Now, I told you before that I already compared this to the length of my quilt to make sure that these 2 strips were gonna be long enough. So I know that they will be. Oh no, my thread's getting ready to come out. So I know that this is going to be long enough for this side. So I'm just going to line it up. And I probably won't show you the entire time that I'm sewing this on because it's a little bit of a long border. But I'm going to get this all lined up and then I'm just going to sew this. I haven't cut this border. I haven't done anything to it. I just took the 2 pieces that I just cut at the table, sewed them together, pressed that seam open, and now I'm just going to start adding it to the side of my quilt top. Now, because there's a lot of bulk, be sure that you've got, your quilt supported and it's not hanging down, because that'll just pull your seam off. Boy, it just never, this went lickety-split when I'm not filming. And every time you get on camera, it seems to be finicky. Okay, so I'm going to start sewing. I probably won't show you the whole thing, but I will show you what I do at the end. So I'm just going to keep going along here and, maneuvering my quilt, lining up the side to add this border. And I'm going to line up the next section, make sure that it's straight, make sure I don't lose that bottom piece. I like to have an eye on this bottom piece so that I know it's not like way over here. I hate it when that happens. I'm just going to keep doing this all the way down the quilt, kind of section by section. And as I go further and further, I'm going to put more of my quilt up on my table so that it's supported. And the rest of it's on my lap so that it's supported there so it's not hanging down on the ground, because that'll just pull your fabric where you don't want it to go. Okay, so I'm going to do this all the way through to the end, and then I will meet you back at the table to show you what I do with the rest of the border. I'll be back in just a little bit. Okay, everyone, so I'm down to the end of adding my border. You can see this is my quilt top, and this is my border that I have extra of. So I didn't cut it ahead of time, because I just think that this is a little bit faster and easier to do it this way. But again, do it however you want to do it. So I'm gonna sew this last little bit to get the rest of my border on there. Now when I get to about this part, I'm gonna keep an eye on where the end of my quilt top is so that I know where to backstitch. Okay, now I'm going to take you over to the table and we're just going to square this up and we're going to cut this edge off. So I'll meet you at the sewing space. Okay, so we're back at the cutting table, and I have a little bit of a tail of my border on my quilt top, so I'm going to show you what I do to get rid of that. So again, I didn't cut this ahead of time because I think it's easier to just sew it on and then cut it at the end. That way I don't ever have to worry that I'm going to be short. You know, like I miscut it. As long as I've measured it and I know that I have excess, or compare it to your quilt top and know that I have excess, then I prefer not to cut because I'm afraid, what if I miscut and then I'm short and then I have to add a little bit more and it adds an extra seam. So instead I add the border like this. And then I'm just gonna square it up with this side, and I'm squaring up. I have a line going along this bottom line so that I know that it's straight, and then I just cut that part off. And then ta-da. Now I'm gonna take this over and I'm going to press this border so that it's flat, so that the seam is flat. And then I'll meet you back here to wrap it up. So join me, come back, don't stop the video now. Come back because I'm gonna share who won the prize this week. I need to pull that name quick, and then I will share who the prize winner is for this week. So I'll be back with you in just a couple minutes. You guys, that's a wrap for our Guiding Stars Quilt Along. Look! The quilt is complete, and it is big, and it is so pretty. I mean, look at all of these beautiful Songbook fabrics that have been brought together in this quilt, and you get to enjoy all of them. You know, like they're just beautiful. Look at these. They are all so, so pretty, and you get to have them all in one quilt to enjoy. I love it. I am so glad we decided to do this. And in 4 weeks, we have a finished quilt. That's pretty awesome. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm loving the Guiding Stars quilt that we put together. It's a good size. And now all I have to do is sandwich it and quilt it and then bind it. And so the last part, after you get it sandwiched, quilted, you'll need to do binding. And it doesn't say in the pattern what width to cut your strips. That's really a preference. Some people cut theirs 2 inches wide for their binding. I usually do 2.5. So that's probably what I will do is I'll do 2.5-inch strips. And then once this is quilted, I'll add my binding. And this is the fabric that we're using for the binding. So that will be after all of the quilting is done. And then you still have some extra fabric in your quilt kit to enjoy for other little projects. So that's really cool too, to have a little bit of Songbook in your life to pull from your stash to use for future projects. So yay, this was an awesome quilt along. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, I have a couple things to share with you, a couple exciting things. First of all, the winner this week for our Songbook tin, sewing tin, which this is a really awesome tin. I love it. As you can hear, I've got goodies in there. The winner for this week is Sparkling Ridge Quilts. So Shannon, yay for you. Thank you so much for posting your progress pictures on Instagram and using hashtag Happy Little Stitch Shop and hashtag Guiding Stars QAL. Thank you so much for doing that. Your project looks beautiful. I can't wait to see it all come together for you and get to see your finished quilt. So thank you for sharing. And then another little giveaway or prize, a little perk for all of you for joining us for this quilt along and also for reserving your kit at Happy Little Stitch Shop. You can enjoy 15% off of your backing. So if you haven't already gotten your backing, please enjoy 15% off at happylittlestitchshop.com. Using code Guiding Stars QAL. And that code will get you 15% off as long as you reserved your kit with Happy Little Stitch Shop and you got your kit with us. So thank you so, so much for that. Thank you for joining us for our quilt along. I hope you had fun. I am so glad that I got to make this quilt with you. Please be sure that you follow Happy Little Stitch Shop on Instagram and Facebook. Please join our Happy Little Stitchers Facebook group. Please also give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our Happy Little Stitch Shop YouTube channel. And we are getting ready for our future quilt alongs. So next up, we have Roadside Harvest by Corey Yoder. We are doing a quilt along for that adorable quilt kit. We still have some available in the shop. So if you would like to get that and join our quilt along, we would love for you to sew with us. Also coming up for future quilt-alongs, we have Granny's Teapots by Lori Holt. We're going to be starting that quilt-along pretty soon. And then next month, we have a few more starting, such as Marian Brightly, featuring the Marian Bright fabric by Me and My Sister's Designs. And we also have coming up some Heather Peterson quilt-alongs in the future using her Indigo Garden collection, which is coming soon. So please take a peek at all the quilt-alongs we have, and we hope that you will join us for future ones. Thank you so much, you guys. Enjoy your Guiding Stars quilt, and thank you so much for quilting along with us. Have a great day, everybody. Happy stitching.